Welcome to Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. Our team's goal is to present science-based information about gardening and all things nature in New York's Hudson Valley. Hosts Jean and Tim, along with team members
Teresa, Linda, and Annie,
are master gardener volunteers for New York's Columbia and Greene counties. So if you're interested in gardening or nature, or nuggets of information about what's happening outside your door, settle in. Enjoy the conversation. Whatever the season, we have something to say.
Hello and welcome to Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. I'm Jean Thomas.
And I'm Tally Young.
We're here today with Larry DiDonato, also known to readers of the Mountain Eagle and the digital newspaper Porcupine Soup, as the author of the column Outdoors with Larry DiDonato. Larry's a retired DEC officer and keeps up to date on all things fishing and hunting.
Welcome, Larry. Let's start with your history. We've heard so much about you, and we're following you for a very long time in the local papers, but we don't really know that much about your career. Could you tell us a little bit more?
Well, absolutely. First, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to speak with you folks, and thanks for following the column. My story is pretty much, I was a city kid. I grew up in Brooklyn in my younger years, and I'm always, we fished on Long Island, so that kind of got me going at a very young age. And as far as my career goes, I began it on Long Island my first 3 years as an ECO, Environmental Conservation Officer, where we focused chiefly on marine fisheries, enforcement, a lot of climbing and fishing and safety, public health, and environmental and wetlands type of ECO work. In 1989, I transferred to Greene County, where I was an ECO for 12 years. And in 1998, I was promoted to lieutenant in New York City, of all places, right? And even though I was familiar with it, it was a bit of a little hesitation, but I was shocked. It was an eye-opener how much poaching was going on, how the extent and the scale of poaching in New York City.
That's weird. Who thinks of that kind of stuff going on in the city?
Nobody.
It's not all urban. Staten Island isn't exactly, I guess.
That's true. There's a lot of green spaces in Staten Island, but it really wasn't the focus. I mean, right now they have problems with deer and turkey or actually overrunning Staten Island. That's another story.
Really?
Oh, absolutely.
Good.
Yeah, my sister-in-law says she can't get out of her house sometimes with turkeys, or she's afraid of them, and the bucks during rut.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a population issue, and actually a good example to segue of what happens when you have a non-hunting environment in a green, where you have wildlife populations, and they don't know what to do down there because they're not hunting and they're trying to contraception, which doesn't really work. So anyway, but to get out the poaching on Long Island is chiefly in the waterways in the New York Bight.
Okay, so you've got freshwater, saltwater, combination water.
Limited fresh water like Central Park, Prospect Park, but the fishing is absolutely outstanding in New York City.
Wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
You police the fishing in Central Park? Is that in your...
Not really a priority, no. We really don't much, but it's the main fisheries enforcement is out on Jamaica Bay and all of the bays and the ocean surrounding New York City.
Sure, yeah. I just kind of like the idea of you busting somebody for fishing in Central Park without their license.
Oh yeah, that's a big kind of a big case up here, but down there when we arrested people for illegal poaching, we would confiscate 100,000 pounds of striped bass illegally netted in the Hudson River.
Oh.
We work with DAs in Bergen and New Jersey, New York, organized crime issues with the fish market. We had big arrests. People did some time on that case. Another case, Lake Sturgeon, $150,000 fine for illegally marketing and illegal lake sturgeon. So everything you did there was huge.
Yeah, large scale. Then you came back up here, or did you retire out of the city?
No, I came back up. I only did 14 months. I can't even tell you how much we did down there. It was just amazing. Even the environmental work was out. I mean, not just me personally, but it was big. When we did solid waste checks, it was 200 solid waste facilities, transfer stations, and again, a lot of organized crime at the time controlled quite a bit of that industry, and we wrestled that back, and so everything was big. So I came up here in 1989, and everything got real sleepy. It's a regular ECO job. And it was fantastic, but took an adjustment. Did that for 12 years. I'm sorry, I got it a little wrong. 1989, I was an ECO. 98 I came back in 99. Only 1 year down in the city, but a lot happened. And I was a lieutenant for Greene and Delaware counties.
Okay. How did you get to be a captain? You retired as a captain, right?
Yes, I was a lieutenant till 2008, and I became captain in Region 5, which is the Adirondacks.
Okay.
And came back to Region 4 and then headquarters when I retired in 2015.
Okay. Well, you kept busy. All right. I've been reading your columns and your reports for a long time. My husband was an avid fisherman and slightly less avid hunter. Your opinions mesh exactly with his philosophy of negotiating the world among native creatures with an equal right to be here. You even share his frustrations with some of the bureaucratic misdeeds, which amuses me, that plague the average guy. Have you always been an outdoors guy, even as a city kid?
Yeah, like I said, I used to go out to Long Island and fish, and that kind of got me the bug. And I hunted also when I was pretty young, 15 years old.
Yeah.
I'd come upstate. So I've always done it. And yeah, the bureaucratic frustrations are current. You know, one of my last columns was about the paper license tags, which is DEC decided to take this very protective, really strong Valoron tag that was nearly indestructible.
Yeah, those are cool.
Just replace it with basic typing bond. And now, we hold the hunter to a high standard, and the tag is kind of the center of your compliance check. People are going to cheat. They'll lie on the day. They'll alter the tag, use it over again. Now they could print 20 at a time at home with the printing. So it was kind of a...
Well, speaking of enforcement, you usually close your column by saying happy hunting, fishing, and trapping until next time. Remember to report poaching violations by calling 1-844-DEC-ECOS. That covers a lot of territory. As a retired captain, you must be up to date on all those rules and regulations, and when it comes to a lot of the topics we cover, there's usually a very complex interaction between the state, the local, and the federal entities. Is that the case when it comes to fish and game?
I would say not really, no. The state ECO, the game warden, he's the first and last line of defense against poaching and pollution, combating poaching and polluting. Our state and local police said they had their hands full with traditional law enforcement. And the federal Fish and Wildlife agents really have a narrow focus on waterfowl enforcement and endangered species. And they're quite far few between. So we do work with them. We have a great relationship. We help them. They help us. But the state ECO is on his own when it comes to poaching and polluting.
Well, that's kind of cool. Everybody's got his own lane and he stays in it?
Well, yes. Well, that's the problem. Well, if you bring up a good point, staying in the lane of the ECOs, now, like I said, these are highly trained officers. It's very specialized wildlife conservation law enforcement, fish and wildlife, and environmental law enforcement. And they're well paid. They may argue with you on that, but they're very highly paid and very highly trained. Yet they can't spend as much time as they'd like combating poaching and environmental enforcement. They get pulled away.
Back to the bureaucracy thing.
Right. Yeah. And they're doing a lot, wildlife. They do a lot of distress wildlife responses. Speaking with someone the other day, they get as many, sometimes 9 complaints for distress wildlife in a day, occasionally. Not the norm, but it happens. And you see the pictures, and it's great when they rescue, and they help rescue eagles and their bears and nuisance bears. And it's great, and they should help, and they should be there. But we have wildlife technicians in the Bureau of Wildlife. Okay. That is their job. And they kind of, we should have more wildlife technicians and more ECOs. But they get pulled away. And we even have a SWAT team that really pulls them away from
an ECO SWAT team.
Absolutely. And it's a problem.
What do you SWAT?
Well, they really suck up a lot of resources over time, manpower.
Yeah.
And it takes away from the enforcement aspect. Absolutely.
Wow. Is there a new TV series coming up?
Hopefully it's not on the special operations group, which are good guys. They're dedicated, but it's taken us away from the mission. So we're getting back to the focus and the interaction. It's all we have is the ECO, and the feds do their thing and the state police do their, but we need the ECOs to do the enforcement.
Okay. Now I told you before, my husband was a fisherman and a hunter. Do you consider yourself more of a hunter or a fisherman?
But it varies by season. It really
Okay.
does. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. And when it comes to that, I trout fish and striper fish in the spring, and then bass, fishing largemouth bass for the summer, and then switch over to hunting, bow hunting, and for deer, and do a lot of duck hunting in the fall.
You do a lot of fly fishing? We are in the Catskills.
Oh, yeah, I bet. I'm a hacker, a fly fisherman for 30 years. So yeah, I
You're
like.
starting to learn?
Well, I learned a long time ago. I just, yeah, I do. I enjoy it. I do enjoy fly fishing.
This is really exciting for me because my dad was a fisherman and a hunter, and he always spoke about fly fishing as something he wanted to do. I don't know if you ever
It's a religion, I think.
It's relaxing or frustrating, or alternately.
Yeah, amazing. Well, okay, let's get to the elephant, or let's say the Bambi in the room. As gardeners and naturalists, we spend a lot of time thinking about deer and their outsized effect on everything in our environment. Such a dramatic effect. From a hunter's perspective, what do you want to add to the conversation? Suggestions, current thinking about it?
Well, deer, I think you're referring to the problem with overpopulation of deer, even just normal populations of deer eating shrubs, ornamentals, expensive stuff. A lot of time and effort goes in as gardeners and naturalists, vegetable gardens. And the best thing that gardeners can do is encourage hunting on their property or nearby, if possible. And I don't mean just allowing the public just to come on, but if you have a trusted neighbor who hunts, somebody who maybe not thought about hunting and maybe had some agnostic or was maybe not thinking that hunting is a good thing, definitely consider hunting, because without it, we would be overrun. Unfortunately, we don't have a pristine environment. It's been affected by suburbs and a lot of development. So we have to have a wildlife management, the North American wildlife management model, where we have hunting as a means to control.
But how is it going? I've heard that there's less hunting of deer going on lately. Is it so?
I don't have the latest numbers, but license sales, what's happening, the problem with hunting is they're aging out. The old-time hunters are not being recruited at the rate that they once were. It's changing a little. It's kind of flat, but we're going to, they've been predicting losing hunters. So this is a great service that, 600,000 hunters come in and will harvest deer, which helps the population for free. So yeah, people should encourage.
Well, not only for free, they're an income source to the state, no?
Absolutely. You're talking $40 million a year in license sales to the conservation fund. Also, it includes some fines for arrests for fish and wildlife offenses.
Okay, then how come they got so many stupid rules? This is what I hear from all my hunter friends.
Yes.
Like, why can't they just go shoot a bunch of does?
That's part of the
I
wildlife management too,
oversimplify.
and that's why I will give it to wildlife. They really follow it. You have to really measure it and control the hunt and the harvest as much as possible, so that they do it through rules of not shooting does or shooting a certain amount of does, and then you have the enforcement. That's why you need the game wardens, the ECOs, to make those rules actually have a deterrent effect. But it can't just let it go. The conservation model really calls for a strict wildlife management, as strict as it can be done with it.
It's not doing terribly well with the overpopulation. They need new statisticians.
The ECs, they're aware of it, and they'll change. Like in the village of Catskill, they allowed bow hunting, but the biggest thing, because I'm chairman of the Fish and Wildlife Management Board for Region 4, and our mission is to increase habitat, quality of habitat, and access for hunting and fishing and other recreation. And it's a real problem that we really don't have a lot of access. I'll tell you a good success story. Nature Conservancy used to be, I won't state their policy, but they really didn't allow hunting way back on their properties, and they are in control of huge tracts of forest lands, especially, and they love hunting now. They encourage the DMAPs where they shoot does because of the damage to the natural forest in the state.
Yeah.
It's overrun, so they've come around, and we would hope other groups and even people in charge of open spaces would seriously consider changing policies to allow hunting for that and other reasons.
Oh, sure, just for the control.
Absolutely.
Well, I was talking in one of our interviews to one of the nursery people who clearly has battled with this constantly. And I said, well, what would you suggest, because you've got this huge overpopulation of deer, and he just sort of licked his lips and said, eat them.
Well, yeah, that's a great...
So if we can get venison to become a popular food, we'll be all set.
Absolutely, and it is popular. If you went to buy it in the store, it's $30 a pound, or it's expensive. But the Hunters Helping the Hungry is just one program where a lot of deer are donated, and that's another area where we can maybe help get that going. It's actually very strong in New York State. There's millions of pounds going to families, going to food banks who are been hurting the last few years since COVID or before. Lots of support in the community where great venison is donated to anybody who wants it.
No, the police forces step up on this too, because I had a car once I called Deer Slayer.
Yes.
And all of its victims were donated because the cop that came to dispose of it would donate it to a food pantry. So those are definitely a resource.
Absolutely. And hunter-killed deer are even better because they don't have the road rash or anything. It's real pristine and wilting. It's a great program.
That's good. We will make sure we put that in the show notes.
Sure.
Okay. We also spend a lot of time talking about global warming. Floods and drought, heat waves, superstorms, but I guess human incursions like buildings and roads, we're kind of messing a bunch of stuff up too.
Sure.
As someone attuned to the wildlife in general, are you seeing, I mean, you're not just a hunter and a fisherman, you are a participant in the larger community.
Absolutely.
Are you seeing a pattern of changes in wildlife habitat and populations over the last decade or two because of all this global warming and people interfering? Are you seeing patterns?
Well, the one thing that I think that's fairly obvious is the winters have been less harsh. So that's the main natural source of mortality for deer is winters and cars. So we have a lot of cars. The winters are less harsh, so more deer survive, so we have higher deer populations. That's one aspect. And the other thing is the midges that bite deer, they also are not being killed by frost, so they're surviving, and then they caused a big outbreak of EHD, which is a hemorrhagic disease that killed quite a few deer. It really dented the population in the Hudson corridor, and so they're surviving. And then also ticks used to be, you guys would be the experts. They used to be in the warmer areas. Now they're all throughout the state.
They're in the freaking house.
Sure. They're everywhere.
Okay. You were talking about, when you close out your column, hunting, fishing, and trapping.
Yeah.
Tell us about trapping.
Yeah, that's the other elephant in the room. Trapping is
all a note.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not. Trapping is an extremely important function in New York State and a great recreation. And that they're declining in numbers as well, and as far as trappers. And we need trappers, raccoon rabies, just to have species that are rabies vectors controlled in that way.
The coyotes on the golf course.
Coyotes and bobcats had less of a problem, but rabies vectors, especially raccoon pelts and foxes. And when we have low trapping, we have more population and a lot easier spread of rabies. So trapping is a great thing. It's the New York State Trappers Association should be commended for keeping it alive. It's been a challenge in New York State. There's been a lot of anti-trapping sentiment, and some changes that are okay, but they really are fighting the fight every day and to promote trapping and to expand it. We need trapping.
Okay, let's talk about, you're talking about trapping for nuisance animals. Nobody traps for beavers and raccoons to make hats and coats.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We have some great local trappers and coyote hunters, and some of the products. Ed Gorch of the New York Bull Hunters, he's got some beautiful. I mean, he makes some really.
That's my neighbor.
Yeah, talk to Ed about some of the.
Well, he traps right behind my house.
Yeah, exactly. So he's taking raccoons and coyotes off the landscape again, controlling rabies. And making some beautiful, a lot of them are Native American style, different, I guess it would be pack baskets and other decorative things that are absolutely, it's a big industry for raccoon and beaver pelts.
So I've never seen a raccoon anything for sale anywhere. How do you learn about this?
Well, it's funny because it's true. It's been
specialized.
A lot of furs have been kind of demonized. The sport of trapping has been demonized, and media, and it's got a bad rap, and it really doesn't deserve it. But so maybe that's why you don't see it as much. Or you see it if you go online, you could definitely see these products. Or just talk to Ed. He's going to point you right in the right direction. Get some beautiful stuff.
Yeah,
he's a craftsman.
Yeah. So it's sort of a niche industry, but it's a pretty sizable industry.
Oh, the fur industry it's more than a niche. It's international. It is big. It is big business. The Asian market and European markets. It ebbs and flows with those markets, with the price of pelts, whether it's worth it, for the trappers to move.
Okay, so now deer hunting is an income source. What about trapping licenses and stuff like that? Is that an appreciable kind of thing, or is that a licensed thing?
It contributes to the conservation fund. Whenever you buy a trapping license, that money goes to towards that $40 million a year that the license sales. Which I kind of just getting back to the bureaucratic frustrations what the reasons why the DEC gave to switch from the indestructible Varroa to a piece of tissue paper was the cost. They said, well, was $40 million not enough a year to pay a little extra for this
to do it right,
really high performing tag? So I think there's enough money for that.
Okay, how many villages and towns along the river have public ramps?
That's a good question. No, the nearest one on this side of the river would be the village of Athens. Has a beautiful state ramp, very easy to use. Yeah, it works perfectly. Cooksaki has a very good boat ramp. These are all free ramps. And then across the river, we've got Henry Hudson Park, right down in Hudson, free ramp there, and Germantown. And I forgot Saugerties has a great ramp too, a town park ramp.
So as far as resources and access to the river, which is conversations about the Hudson River,
Sure.
We're really rich in this area, and it's a well-used resource,
Absolutely. I mean, it's a great resource, and it's another environmental success. I mean, you talk about other agencies, federal agencies, EPA, DEC, and other partners. I mean, it's a lot cleaner than it was 50 years ago, or what is it? They used the old when it was on fire back in the old days in the 20s. The Hudson River was on fire.
I thought it was only the Cuyahoga.
Yeah. It's a magnificent resource. Great striper fishing.
That's great.
Great everything.
Okay.
Boating and all.
We talked to some of the most interesting people around, and we want to know what in this crazy, insane world that we live in with all of the problems, what gives you hope for the future?
Well, it's a good question, and there's two things that come to mind, and one is the organized sportsmen, which we haven't talked about today because we're talking about hunting and fishing and trapping, and they're the ones. There's two levels. So the county federations, these are all volunteers, and they get together and they give back to hunting. They're the ones who organize the venison donations to Hunters Helping the Hungry program and other programs like that. They're recruiting youth, and I work with them with the youth pheasant hunt in Greene County, and they happen in every county, pretty much every other county in the state. I live in New York City, and they're really giving back every day. So they're finding their voice again. Then there's the state organizations like the New York State Conservation Council, which is the voice of the state-wide sportsmen. The Conservation Fund Advisory Board, which holds DEC accountable to the Conservation Fund for the $40 million, and there's a lot more than that in there. And then Fish and Wildlife Management Board, which I'm in part of, which really strives for increased access and habitat improvement on private lands for recreation, hunting, fishing, trapping, kayaking, everything. And well, that's one. The other is hunters have so much in common with environmental advocates. I really think that they can get together. It's the same thing. We need to protect the environment, to protect the habitat, to increase the access and support hunting. And like I said, the Nature Conservancy, for example, so involved in hunting now. That type of thing should happen on a lot of fronts. All the organizations should be talking, and the ECOs should be talking too, because they have the same mission.
And we're seeing that start to evolve?
I think so. I think there's a lot of room for that to grow.
Good. Well, then that sounds pretty hopeful. Thank you, Sir Dan.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was great.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That concludes another episode of Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. We would like to thank Sandra Powers and Devin Connolly from Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene Counties for production support. And a special thank you to our listeners for joining us on this episode of Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. You can find links to any of the topics mentioned in this episode at our website at ccecolumbiagreen.org. Comments and suggestions for future topics may be directed to us at columbiagreenmgb@cornell.edu or on the CCE Master Gardener Volunteers of Columbia and Greene Counties Facebook page. For more information about Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene Counties, visit our website at ccecolumbiagreen.org or visit us in Hudson or in Acra. Cornell Cooperative Extension provides equal programming and employment opportunities